Okay, welcome everybody to Finance 231. This is week one. My name is David Shipley. I'm the professor and facilitator for this course, um, and look forward to it. Thanks, Annette, for being part of tonight. I realize there's a national championship NCAA football game tonight. I also realize it's late where many of you are at, this 8 o'clock time. And I also realize it's the first day of a new mod, so kind of difficult to plan your life accordingly when you just barely found out this morning, or maybe even just found out just sometime today when this was going to be. I'll try to remember to email Sunday or Monday next week early to give you all a reminder to join us. The more people we have, the better. So Annette, thank you very much for joining. The whole class appreciates you participating. It's a lot harder for me as the instructor to have a discussion or to answer questions, obviously, when there's not any participants. So thank you for being here. We appreciate you. And by the way, what time is it where you're at, Annette? Just wonder how late it is where you're at. Okay, so you're actually in pretty good shape then. Sometimes I'll have people back east and it's 10 o'clock and we go till 11 and it's hard to keep them awake, but you should be okay, right? Oh, you go into work at 8:30. Wow. Okay. Well, we'll try to wrap up. We'll try to wrap up as close to 9 my time as we possibly can to get you off. But if you need to check out a few minutes early, no problem. Obviously, everybody's got this opportunity to listen to the entire session or re-listen to the entire session at your own convenience. I'll try to make these sessions as fast-moving and informative and helpful as possible. That's my goal. I've been through in some different online courses myself when I was going to school that I felt like were just the professor reviewing slides, and I didn't get as much from those as I did from folks who were trying to help me understand the content, understand my coursework for the week, which we'll always do every single time with these sessions. And for me, and this is just my personality, maybe I have some ADD or something like that, but I like the course to move along a little bit faster. So if you can't keep up or if you feel like I go too fast, you're always welcome to, listen to the session later and re-listen to different parts if it makes sense to catch things. But I'd rather have an hour where we get as much content as we possibly can into the course, and so that's what I do on a weekly basis. I mentioned my name is David Shipley. I work as a certified financial planner, financial advisor of investments for Zions Bank here in Utah, and I've been doing financial planning for about 13 years. I also have been teaching through Steven Senegar Online for the last 5 years. I used to teach live courses, and from a scheduling standpoint, it's really difficult to schedule those classes. And so these online classes give me the opportunity to still teach, which I enjoy, but do it in a more flexible time frame. So that's me. I've got 2 young daughters, and my wife and I and our 2 daughters live in Utah. Big BYU fan. I'm a graduate of BYU. I also have a master's in financial services and an MBA. So 2 different master's degrees, and enjoy anything related to finance. So you'll probably hear the enjoyment that I have in some of this stuff throughout some of this course. Hopefully you'll be able to hear that and feel that. And if you have any questions or concerns about finances in general that we don't cover in this class, be it personal finance, corporate finance, anything related to investments or finance, I'd encourage you to just send me a quick email. I'd be happy to answer anything that might come up in your lives, and just try to give you some feedback and add some value for you beyond the course if it's helpful. Okay, so that's a little bit about me. We'll learn a little bit more about you all on the intro page, the intro discussion page, which is not graded, but it is helpful for me to be able to get a feel for who is in the class. As far as the course is concerned and grades are concerned, I'll have grades input into the grade book each week. As far as the assignments done on time and the coursework that's done on time, I'll have all that coursework graded by Tuesday at noon. The school allows me till Wednesday at noon. I just try to make sure I'm always in by Tuesday at noon, but usually it's Monday night after the class that I'll finish up the grading and make sure that you have everything as far as feedback. Now, when it comes to grading, I always, I'll try to always give you some feedback on what you could do to improve your score. So just keep that in mind. If you get some notes in on your grade that you're missing a post, or your assignment's too short as far as the content requirement, or something to that end, just know that I always am willing to have you edit or add things on the discussion board. I'm always willing to have you resubmit assignments for additional credit. I don't usually allow full credit on a resubmission, but I do give additional points for that additional effort. And so it's always important to me that you check the feedback on in the gradebook, and if you can use that feedback, to improve your score, I'd encourage you to do it. Along those same lines, when I finish all the grades, usually, some people get a little bit impatient because they turn in their assignment maybe on Wednesday or Thursday, and then I don't grade it until Monday or Tuesday with everybody else's work. I do that because, for me, when it comes to grading, if I grade things all at once, I tend to be more fair about the grading. If I grade things from day to day and over a longer period of time, it's more difficult for me to set a consistent expectation, for a particular assignment. And so if you'll bear with me, even if you turn in your assignment early in the week, I'll usually wait and grade everything together after it's due. And so that's why you'll get grades Monday, at the latest Tuesday by noon. Any questions so far, Nat? All of this probably just regular housekeeping issues that you've heard before. I assume that this is not your first online course, and so nothing new probably so far. Some of the housekeeping issues that we'll cover tonight won't be anything new for you, and we'll just have to be patient with me for a few minutes here as we go through those for the sake of anybody who may possibly be in this course for their first online mod. One thing that Annette, you and I discussed before we got on the recorded session that I think would be helpful for everybody. This is one of those courses where it used to have an ebook, but I'm not seeing an ebook loaded into the course this time. If you all find it and I'm just missing it somewhere, zip me a quick email and let me know. But I've searched through the site. I don't see the ebook at this point, which is okay. And the reason it's okay is because the discussion boards, the checkpoints, the assignments, you don't need the book for them. We're going to give you readings, different website links every single week that allow you to get that work done without having an ebook. Now, as far as the assessments are concerned, the assessments do follow a textbook that did exist on this course. You can see it's the 12th version of Investing, the Fundamentals of Investing by Smart, Gitman, and Junk. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, but those three authors. Anyway, you're welcome if you can find a copy of that to check out from your local campus, or if you can find a way to get the text or the e-text. That might help you a little bit preparing for the assessments. My commitment to you, though, is if you'll review these sessions, I will give you the material. I will give you the material that you need to know to be successful on the assessment each week. Sometimes it will be me giving you the topic, not necessarily the answer, just overtly, but sometimes I'll give you a topic, and if you'll just research a little bit about that topic, you'll be in great shape for the test each week. But every week during the session, we'll make sure and cover the content that will be on the test for that week, so that you feel comfortable that if you put in some effort and study those topic areas, you'll be in good shape. I will also post the slides each week, and the slides have a lot of that content that you're going to be tested on, since, as I mentioned before, the assessments are going to kind of follow an e-text that existed before on basic investments. Now, as far as this week is concerned, all the content, all the topic areas that I give you, they're either going to be in the slides or they're going to be easy to find online before you get to the test. So if you'll just take a few notes about what I tell you will be on the test, you'll be in great shape, and no need to worry about not having an ebook or e-text for this particular course. One quick thing, a lot of professors I'm finding are not consistent as far as late work is concerned. I accept late work all the way up until the last Saturday of the mod at midnight. After the last Saturday at midnight, we can't accept anything. I can't grade anything as far as additional submissions. But up until that point, I can accept anything. And I do accept most everything. Having said that, I can't give you full credit for late work. And so, although that sounds, like a generous school policy that we accept late work, because a lot of schools, it's just you're not able to turn something in on time, then you get a 0 for that assignment. We're not going to do that. We're going to give you most of the credit. We'll just discount your score if you turn something in late. However, first of all, if you're trying to get an A in the class, turning in late work's not going to, you're not going to cut it. You're not going to be able to get an A, most likely, I should say. Secondly, what I find very consistently over the last 5 years teaching online classes is those folks who wait and wait and wait and procrastinate turning in everything, they run a very high risk that life's going to throw them a curveball that last week of the mod, and they're not going to be able to get the class completed. Okay, I don't know if you've ever had that experience, Annette, but it seems like if something can go wrong that final week and you're finding yourself behind on your work, it will go wrong. You know, a computer problem, a family issue, a health issue, a work issue, something will come up and prevent you from having the time that you had hoped you would have to complete the course. And so I'd strongly encourage you to stay caught up. It's the best way to get the most from a course like this, to learn the most that you can, to be able to have a chance to get an A in the class, which I think everybody should always try for that. It's not so hard that we shouldn't all have that expectation. But if you're just trying to pass, and I realize there's a handful of you that just need to get through this class and just want to get a passing grade, just be aware that even if that's the case, I would still try to stay as caught up as possible so that we don't find ourselves in week 4 not having the adequate time to get done. Okay, so enough about that. That's my little soapbox for a second. Please try to stay caught up. Please don't find yourself behind. The most common issue for people not passing the classes that I've taught in the past is not that they couldn't do it. It's just they run out of time, right? And they find themselves too far behind. Marianne, thank you for joining. Annette is breathing a sigh of relief that you're here and able to join us, because she was feeling a lot of pressure and anxiety about being the only student, right? I'm just kidding about that. Annette was handling it very, very well. So anyway, but we appreciate you being here. If you have no issues, Marianne, if you have any questions about that first part, just send me a quick email later on, and I'll get right back to you. Speaking of that, we might as well transition to that. If you have any questions or concerns about the course, I have posted my phone number, but because I have a day job, it's sometimes difficult for me I can't step out of appointments or meetings many times to get to your call. So just the very easiest way, you can even text me on that phone number that I provided, but the very easiest way and most convenient way for me to respond is via email, and I'll always respond via email within a day to your questions. Now, some people just comment to different things in an email, like, hey, my work's going to be a little bit late this week, just to give me a heads up on that. Just because I don't respond to a comment doesn't mean that I didn't read it. I always read them. Sometimes I just don't respond if it's not a particular question or issue that I need to address, okay? So email is the very best. I've posted my email. I've posted my phone number. But yeah, email's the easiest way for us to communicate. And I'll try to email out periodically, reminders about different things and opportunities that you have in the course. All right, so real quick, let's just review expectations. I'm sure none of these are going to be a surprise to any of you. Obviously, checkpoints in a course like this, in any of your online courses, can become a phenomenal opportunity for extra credit. This isn't a course that I'm going to offer a bunch of extra credit where you can get lots and lots of extra points and that you're going to all get 120% in the class. So having said that, the very easiest way to get a half a letter grade worth of extra credit is to every day complete the checkpoint and every day put in sufficient effort with the checkpoint to get it right for those 5 points, because you've got up to a half a letter grade by the end of the mod in extra credit associated with checkpoints. Not to mention the fact that about 20% of your overall grade comes from just the regular points associated with checkpoints. So if you miss them all, there's no way for you to get an A. There's hardly any way for you to get a B. It becomes very unlikely that you'll even get a B in the class if you've missed all the checkpoints. So I just strongly encourage you to establish now, it's a little easier here at the new year, right? But establish now some kind of pattern of, take 5 minutes at some point during the day, every day, and make sure you get your checkpoints done. And instead of asking me for extra credit opportunities, especially early on in the course, a better route to go would be to just be very consistent about your checkpoints, because that's a phenomenal opportunity to help your grade and to get lots of extra credit. Okay, so that's checkpoints. Shouldn't be anything new there. As far as discussion boards in this course, you're going to have reading links as far as website links that are expected to be read. And then after you read those links, there'll be either a case study like there is this week or some kind of question that you're to answer associated with the discussion board. One of the most common reasons for people not to get full credit on a discussion board comment or post is being late, first of all, but secondly is not reading all the instructions. So what they do is they read maybe the first part of the instructions and think that they understand what the instructions are asking for, and so they just quickly do a couple paragraphs for their main post to get it in by Wednesday when it's due. And if they would have just read all the way through the instructions and taken a few notes on what it is that we're really asking for from those instructions, you'd be fine and you get full credit. Discussion boards are an easy way to get points if you'll participate. And the way you participate is you get a main post done by Wednesday at midnight. You get 3 posts done in total by the end of the week. You have 2 responses to peers and then 1 post that's considered a main post, 2 to 3 paragraphs on that main post with at least 1 reference. Most weeks it calls for 2 references, but you just need to look for the instructions and make sure you're following them so that I can give you full credit on those discussion board comments. Shouldn't be anything new there, but please follow the instructions. Give me at least 2 to 3 paragraphs on that main post so that I can give you full credit, and then make sure you've got 3 posts by the end of the week so I can give you full credit on your discussions. Really easy way to get about 1/5 of your grade again, just like the checkpoints. Really simple. Okay. Assignments. I'll be going over content for assignments every single week during the session, so don't be intimidated if you see some instructions that don't really make sense or you feel a little bit overwhelmed by whatever it is that the instructions are asking you to do. We'll cover them, right? We'll cover them every week during the session. We'll make sure that you feel comfortable. We're not going to give you all the answers, right? But we're just going to set you on the right track so you feel very comfortable, or should feel very comfortable, that you can accomplish the assignment and be successful with it. The assignments for me really come down to content requirement and then following instructions. So usually the instructions in a class like this aren't going to require you to have a right or wrong answer. It's not like a math problem in most cases. But what it is it's more about, hey, state your opinion about this. Show me some effort. Show me the fact that you've read some of the articles that we've required you to read. Show me that you were awake during the session, or at least reviewed it at some point. And if you show me those things, or show me some effort, demonstrate some effort, and follow the content requirement, once again, you're going to get full credit. I'm not going to worry about whether or not I agree or disagree with your opinion. I'm not going to be nitpicky about just little things that are little grammatical errors or things like that. I do want them, I do want it your best to be your best work and you to do a good job, but I'm not going to discount you heavily for spelling or for grammar, things like that. I want content, right? We just mentioned I want the content requirement, and I want instructions followed, and if you'll do those 2 things, you'll be in great shape. You'll get a great score on your assignments each week. And then as far as the assessments, pretty straightforward. Week 1 is chapters 1 and 2 from this text that we'll be covering. Week 2 is kind of a midterm that covers chapters 1 through 4. And then the same thing is true for week 3. Week 3 just covers 2 chapters like week 1 did. And then week 4 covers everything to that point. It's a comprehensive final exam. Okay, all multiple choice or true false. It's not one of these classes where you have a big old essay due at the end or something like that. It's just a test every week, and week 2 is comprehensive to that point, and week 4, the final, is comprehensive to that point. Assessments are worth a big part of your grade. If you have a hard time with test taking, sometimes let's help you over prepare for the test if you feel really stressed and get a lot of anxiety about test taking. The best way to overcome some of that is to really get a good grade or 2 on tests because you've really overstudied and over prepared. As I mentioned earlier with Annette, we will cover all the material that you'll need to know as far as the topics that you need to know for the test. It may require you still to go out and freshen up on those topics right before you take the test, do a little bit of additional research and take some additional notes. But if you'll note what we talk about during the session, especially when I actually cover the assessment material, you'll be in great shape and should be just fine for the tests in this class. Okay, so those are the basics of every online course, right? Nothing new there. But any questions or concerns so far as we've talked about all the materials so far? Okay, so one of the things I'm always looking for in the discussion board comments and in the assignments, just make a mental note right now or even note it down, is I want to see that you've read the required readings that are part of the assignment or part of the discussion board, right? So try and demonstrate that you've read those things within your discussion board, within your assignment, and that will really help me to be able to give you full credit for it, because I need to be able to see, or at least feel like the effort was there, with those readings. Most of those readings are very short. They're not really, really long. They're not hard readings. A lot of them come from Investopedia. Investopedia really does a great job explaining things, and I think is a great resource. So should be in good shape there. Nothing to be worried about at this point. I mentioned sessions will probably be every Monday at 8 o'clock. I'm probably going to stay consistent with that. Note that next week is Martin Luther King Day, so some of you will have that as a holiday. I will still teach. If you want to take it off and honor that day and not come to class, I'm not worried about that. Listen to the review session if you need to later, but I'll probably record on Monday next week as well, just as a heads up. Okay. Let's see here. Oh, one quick thing, and this is just something I like to cover just at the beginning of class, and hopefully we won't have to review it later on. The topic of plagiarism. So all of you probably know what plagiarism is, and all of you have probably seen it in the syllabus about the school policy. It just says, hey, plagiarism is not acceptable. The easiest definition for a class like this of plagiarism is you cutting and pasting into a discussion board. That's never okay. We don't ever want a cut and paste job on the discussion. The whole point of the discussion is for you to formulate your own opinions and your own content about what we're talking about, right? It's not for you to go find it and just regurgitate it onto a discussion board. It's for you to form your own opinions, your own feedback, and try to give us some content to discuss, right? So that's a example of plagiarism that happens often on online courses that it just isn't acceptable, that we don't want cut and paste jobs on the discussion board. The other thing is we're going to be writing an essay for this first week's assignment. It's going to be about 3 pages long, because if it's a 750 word requirement, that's about a 3-page essay of content. So if you have a title page and a reference page, it's going to be 5 total pages, but 3 pages of writing if it's 12-point font, double spaced, okay? So if that's how you're doing it, then it's about 3 pages. But on an assignment, when you're writing like that, it's once again, it's tempting to go out and find somebody else's work and submit it as your own. It's tempting to cut and paste paragraphs in. None of that I just mentioned is acceptable. Once again, you can go out and find content. That's not what we're saying that you can't do. But when you find that content, in most cases you put it into your own words, and then you still reference where you found that idea. Okay. So that's the proper way to reference things. I like APA formatted net, but I'm not a stickler on it. So I want to see references. I like having a title page, but if if you're not perfect to form as far as APA, I'm not going to be as concerned about that as much as I am just making sure I've got the right amount of content, again, that you put in the amount of effort that I need. So don't worry about me being somebody who's going to email or dock your grade because your bibliography at the end of your essays not perfect, to APA form. At some point, sooner than later on these courses, practicing correct APA form would be helpful, Annette. But that's not what I'm concerned with in this class. That's what an English class should be concerned with. I'm more concerned, unless it's complete train wreck as far as the formatting, and I mean train wreck as far as just incomplete sentences, lots of misspellings, no flow and format at all. I mean, that's the kind of thing that I'd have to discount a little bit. But if it looks decent and you've put in considerable effort to make sure it flows and reads well, then you're going to be in fine shape, regardless of the details of APA. Okay, so that's a long answer to a short question, but does that kind of answer what you were asking for, Annette? Okay, so a couple other quick things. Clemson and Alabama are tied. It's halftime, 14-14. So just so everybody knows, people listening to this a couple days from now will already know the outcome of the game and think that that was a waste of their time. But just for you, Annette, for you, Marianne, that's important. Yeah, so for full credit, assignments, discussion boards, everything's got to be done by Saturday at midnight, okay? If you want full credit. If you resubmit something that, that was wrong and can be resubmitted, or if you just turn in something late, I can't give full credit, but I can give you most of the credit. So still don't get discouraged if you have a week where you can't get everything in because something comes up. I'm fully aware that life issues come up and prevent us sometimes from turning things in on time. Along those lines, though, and Marianne, maybe this is a good thing to cover, and Annette, every class, it seems like I have people ask me, about Friday or Saturday for an extension, to turn things in late, and the significant family issues, health issues, computer issues, all kinds of good reasons for them to turn things in late, and so they're just letting me know that. Sometimes I get the feeling, though, and sometimes they just ask outrightly, hey, I want to get full credit for this even though I'm turning it in late because of this circumstance. And my response to that is, we give you most of the credit for turning it in late. And because it's an online course, unless I can verify what you're saying, unless you've got an advisor that's emailing me and saying, hey, so-and-so's parent passed away, or so-and-so's child passed away, or so-and-so's been in the hospital, unless you can verify that through an advisor, I can't give you full credit for late work. Okay, so don't even email me, with the different reasons. I'm fully aware that different things come up, and that's why I give you most of the credit, and so we don't need to waste everyone's time with lots of excuses. I always have at least one or two people every course that, we just come up with these really crazy stories of what's going on in their lives to make things late. And I think that's just unfair to the people who are trying to be honest, and trying to turn things in on time. So, unless you've got advisor feedback, that says, hey, this is really what's been going on in your life, and they can confirm it, we're not going to worry about giving you extensions, okay? You're going to get most of the credit. It's still, if you have a bad week because some legitimate things come up, don't worry about it. You've got checkpoints to make up for credit, right? All that extra credit that we talked about that's available on checkpoints. So if you're consistent there, you get the late work in, I'll give you most of the credit. And then if you get everything else in on time, you'll still be great in the course and probably still get an A. Okay, so anyway, it kind of makes me sound like a jerk, but I spend more time than all of you can imagine thinking about emails when people are trying to come up with, reasons why their work's going to be late. And I'd just rather not even worry about most of it unless it's something that, like I say, an advisor can verify. All right, talked about late work, talked about plagiarism, talked about excuses for late work, all kinds of fun topics here. Apologize to spend a lot of time on some of these housekeeping issues for you two. After tonight, we won't have to cover any of these issues. Hopefully, again, we can just jump right into content in future weeks. There will be a learning coach for this course, so if you can't access me during the day, which is pretty likely, I'm not going to have a lot of time during the day to help you one-on-one. Sometimes I can set up, meetings at night in order for us to do some one-on-one if we need to. But if you can't access me as readily as you'd like, there is going to be a learning coach assigned to this course. I'll give you their information and schedule as soon as I receive it. And that's a great resource. The labs and these learning coaches are a great resource to help you out if you ever get stuck on things. My preference would be for you to just send me a quick email, give me a very specific question, I'll give you a specific answer, and you can move on, right? That's a real simple way to get moving again. But if you find yourself, if it's more than just a quick question or two, the learning coach can help you out quite a bit. And that's the tutoring that we used to call it tutoring at Steven Senegar. Now we call it learning coaches, and I guess that sounds better and more politically correct, right? So that's what we've got there, and that'll be a good resource. Okay, I think that's all the housekeeping issues I wanted to cover for the course. Any questions, concerns, problems to this point before we jump into some content and cover some of the material that we need to cover? Okay, so my plan at this point is we've got about half the class left. Unfortunately, we only have about 30 minutes left. So for the next 15-20 minutes, I want to cover some key slides in chapters 1 and 2, some key content issues, and then we'll briefly spend a few minutes on the specific discussion board and the specific assignment for this week. And then the last 5 to 10 minutes, we're going to cover the topic areas that you'll need to know for the quiz this week. The quiz this week is all multiple choice or true and false, and it's only 10 problems, so it should be a pretty fast quiz, pretty fast assessment, shouldn't be real stressful. The only issue is, like I say, if you take a few notes on each one of the topics and make sure and freshen up on it before you get the test, you'll be in great shape. Okay, so let's jump in. Chapter 1, the investment environment. This chapter is really meant to be just a really entry-level discussion about what investments are, how they're used. So an investment is a very broad definition, and this is something I deal with a lot with my work. A lot of people will say, oh, you do investments, and what they're really saying is, oh, you invest people in the stock market, right? That's what they're really saying to me when they say, oh, you do investments, because they kind of have this like skeptical sound about them, right? I must just be a stock market guy. There are many advisors that all they do is stocks and mutual funds that invest in stocks. But most financial planners, most financial advisors work in a lot of different kinds of investments, right? We can do bonds, we can do stocks, we can do mutual funds, we can do ETFs, we can do real estate, precious metals. There's all kinds of things that we can do. And so it's a pretty broad definition when we talk about investments. It's actually even more broad than the types of things that I do, meaning you could invest, Annette and Marianne, you guys could go out and invest in artwork, okay? And I don't help people with artwork. You could go out and invest in a coin collection or a baseball card collection, and that would be an investment to you. It's anything that you think will generate either positive income or positive return, meaning value increase over time. Okay, so it's a pretty broad definition. It's much bigger than just the stock market when we refer to investments, especially in a course like this. And basically, the return has two components to it. We're always trying to get a return, and the return can be either return of value, or it can be return of income. So think in terms of a rental property. Marianne, Annette, if the three of us went and bought a triplex, right? Because there's three of us, so we have 3 units. It's a triplex. There are 3 different units in this building, and this is an investment for us as a partnership. We're going to make money in 2 ways off that triplex. One way is the rent checks, right, that come from our different tenants each month. The other way we're going to make money, and this could be a considerable upside benefit to us as well, is when we go to sell that triplex 10 years from now, because Annette decides that she wants to sell it, and Marianne, you and I are just really nice people, so we say, you know what, Annette, if you want to sell, we're going to sell with you, right? So we all sell, right? Well, there's a very high likelihood that the value of the property would have increased over all that time, and we'll get a return of value as well, right? So we've gotten income from the rent checks, we've gotten value increase from the property value increasing over time. So 2 different components of our return for that particular investment. Some investments don't have an increase in value opportunity. Some investments don't have any income, okay, but they have one or the other. So it just depends. So for example, if I invest in a CD, the only type of increase that I'm going to get on that CD is interest income, right? The value of the core money that I put in is never going to increase. Okay, if I put $100,000 in today, I'm going to have $100,000 next year plus some income, some interest income. So all CDs give me is some interest income. In a stock, I might have dividend income plus the chance for value increase, right? Same thing with bonds. Bonds have a value increase component. It's not very high, but they have some value increase component, and then they have more consistent. They have the bigger issue with bonds. What I'm trying to say is the bigger issue with bonds is their income. Usually, people invest in bonds for the income part. Okay, so that's just some examples of different investments and the return expectation for those types of investments. If you invest in a particular investment like gold and think you're going to get income, you'll be mistaken, right? Gold doesn't create income. If you invest in a bond thinking you're going to get a lot of value increase, you're going to be mistaken there, because bonds are primarily an interest vehicle, to get income. So anyway, those are just some examples of different investments and how they work. and what we're trying to get from them, either interest, income, or value increase, or a combination of those two. Here are just some examples of different securities or property. We use securities interchangeably with investments throughout this course, so just be aware of that. And then we've got different investments that are direct or indirect, right? I could invest directly in a real estate property that I rent, okay, a rental property, or I could invest in a real estate investment trust, or more commonly known as a REIT. So REIT, a REIT. And if I invest in that real estate investment trust, I'm having someone else do the investing in property for me. Okay, I'm not managing property myself, they're doing it for me. Okay, so there's indirect and direct types of investing as well. Stock ownership in the U.S. is very high on a relative basis. You look at a country like France. That's France is a first world country, right? They're a developed country. They're doing pretty well, but only 6 households in 100 will have common stock, where 30% or almost 1/3 of the U.S. of U.S. adults have, U.S. households have stock ownership. A lot of that's through work plans. Like, for example, myself, you work for Zions Bank, you get some Zions stock. So a lot of times it's issued through your company, not necessarily somebody going to E-Trade or Ameritrade and buying stock, although that's pretty popular too. So let's talk about terminology of investments real quick, because it's important to any research that you do about investing. When we talk about stocks and bonds, which are kind of the primary instruments of investing, bonds can be referred to as fixed income. They can also be referred to as debt, okay, because that's what it is. A bond is a debt instrument, a loan instrument between a corporation and you as an individual, or between government and you as an individual, okay? So bonds are debt instruments. They can also be referred to as fixed income because of how they pay interest at a fixed rate. So those are all interchangeable terms. And bonds, debt, and fixed income can all be referred to as securities too. Remember, any kind of investment can be referred to as a security if you can buy and sell it. So not to confuse you all, I'm not trying to make this more complicated than it needs to be, but sometimes when you're out researching or reading an article about investments, you get confused, right? They might use like fixed income, the terminology fixed income. They're really just referring to bonds, okay? Or they might use a debt instrument, and really they're referring to bonds. The same is true for equities, which are stocks, okay? So you might hear the word equity, and an equity is a stock, okay? And then there are different derivatives. We don't need to talk about derivatives, but those are like your options, your swaps, your forex trading. Those are all derivatives that derive their value from other financial products. Okay, so the derivatives derive a value from underlying securities, where debt and equity, or stocks and bonds, are the actual instruments themselves that are deriving value. Okay, clear as mud? Or did we clarify a couple things? And at least, really the thing I wanted to accomplish with this slide is just make sure that you knew that debt, fixed income, and bonds are all the same thing, and then equities and stocks are the same thing. And all of those things can be referred to as securities. Okay, all right. So that's what we wanted to cover there. We've got short and long-term investing. We've got foreign and domestic investing. Foreign and domestic, just the difference between investing in the U.S. versus investing outside of the U.S. When it comes to supply and demand of funds in the United States, we've got government, business, and individuals. We've got 3 different components of money that either create or supply or demand money. Now, all 3 of these can supply or demand money. Okay, but as a general rule, government is a net demander of funds. Okay, they require more funds through taxpayer dollars than they create. Businesses, same thing. They're net demanders of money. They require more funds than they create. And finally, individuals are the only net suppliers of funds. Okay. We as individuals, we go to work, we get paid, and we're the ones that supply funds to the federal government and to companies so that they can grow. and so they can cover their expenses. So when we talk about the federal government having $1 trillion deficit a few years ago, they were spending $1 trillion more than they were making. They were only getting about $2 trillion in revenue from taxes, but they were spending $3 trillion. So there was a difference of $1 trillion that they were spending more than they were making. The only way they can spend $1 trillion more than what they make is to borrow that money. Okay? So when we talk about deficits, that's the value that we're not covering each year in our debts. Okay, in our expenses, excuse me. And then when we talk about the public debt, right, the American debt load, which is about $16 trillion at this point. It's actually closer to 17, 18 trillion now. But the number we used to use is 16 trillion just a few short years ago. That number reflects all the bonds that our federal government owes to individuals, countries, and corporations all around the world. Okay, so government borrows money, so they're a net demander of money to operate. Businesses tend to borrow money to operate and to grow. Individuals tend to be net suppliers. Okay, and we all could come up with individuals that we know, and maybe there's a handful in this class that have to this point in their life been more of a net demander, right? Meaning they've borrowed more money than they've supplied, to the marketplace. But in my world, when I'm dealing with retirees and older folks at the bank, these are folks that have all their debts paid off and they have significant savings and significant investments that they're a perfect example of this net supplier concept of funds. Okay, because they're supplying the funds for those companies to borrow in the form of bonds, or the government to borrow in the form of bonds for the companies or for the government to expand and to pay their expenses. Okay. Any questions? Maybe this is a concept that's a little harder than it should be to understand. The bottom line is, individuals, businesses, and governments are the three categories that either borrow money or supply money, and all three of them borrow and supply at different times. But as a general rule, government and businesses are net demanders, individuals are net suppliers, and you'll see a question about this concept on the test. Okay. All right, here's the example of how that works. Gives you some more examples, types of investments. Talk about mutual funds, exchange traded funds, and hedge funds. There are those concepts. Those are bundled investments that bundle stocks and bonds for you and I as investors. Derivatives, we've talked about that. Talks about the different types of investments. These are good slides when it comes to kind of examples and information about what they are. Talks about how to start investing. We're not going to go through that. Just trying to check if there's any other, because we're not going to go over tax considerations. Nope, not from chapter 1. Any questions from chapter 1 before we move on? And I apologize, we went through that pretty fast, but any questions about chapter 1 before we go on to chapter 2? Yeah, I'll post them. Yep, we'll get those posted, and like I say, those are a good place to review. So that's a good question. They're a good place to review the material that you'll need to know for the test, right? So good to know. All right, can you all see the chapter 2 first slide? And in future weeks, just so you know, we'll have more time to cover content. I know I'm going through content really fast tonight. There's a chance that I've gone through already more content than many of your professors cover in an entire hour. But like I say, that's just my style. I go fast. We'll be able to cover though, and cover more examples in the future when we have more time. So yeah, it always cuts us short that first week, Marianne, when we have to go through kind of the introduction type stuff and the housekeeping issues. So thanks for being patient with that and understanding. We'll get you, like I say, the slides, and so you can review them and kind of look through them and go from there. So chapter 2 is about securities markets. We've already talked about how securities markets can include stocks and bonds, right? We talked about how we can use the term securities to explain almost any kind of investment. So, I can buy and sell securities, and that might mean stocks or bonds, okay, or stocks and bonds, or mutual funds. So there's lots of different investments that all are securities. Well, let's go through a couple of these slides. We don't have a lot of time here. We can probably spend 5 minutes before we need to cover the assignments and the test. But there's a couple things that are important to understand about different securities. We've got different markets. We've got money markets, and that's your short-term securities like money markets at a bank. When you put your money in a money market, that's considered a short-term thing. It's very safe. You can pull it out whenever you need to, right? And it doesn't have to be long-term. Then there's the capital markets. This is considered more of the long-term marketplace, like stocks and bonds. You can buy and sell whenever you want, and you can be short-term as a stock investor, but you shouldn't be, right? And I say you shouldn't be. You can be a short-term investor. I'm not saying you can't, but really stocks and bonds do best for people who are willing to buy and hold them like a Warren Buffett does. He buys and holds, positions for the very long term, and it's done him very, very well. Then there's primary and secondary market. Primary is where you get IPOs, where new companies are issued into the market. And the secondary market is where we buy and sell existing companies. So right now I can buy and sell Apple. That's because it's in the secondary market and Apple stock is already available, right? But Uber, which is a very popular company now, right? It's a private company, so I can't buy Uber stock right now. When they finally, which they will at some point, when they finally go public and have an IPO, an initial public offering, then that initial public offering will be in the primary market when they issue new shares to the public, and then that same day it'll start trading between people in the secondary market. Okay, so the primary market is just when new stocks are brought forward. The secondary market is when stocks are traded after they've already been brought forward. Okay. So here's your initial public offering, 3 ways to do that. Here are some statistics on past IPOs, how often they happen. During good economic times and good stock market times, there's lots of IPOs. During bad economic times, there's far fewer. Here's an example of a preliminary prospectus, a filing for a new IPO, which this particular one was for Yelp. It's kind of fun. It's a company you recognize, probably. Talks about the process of doing it. And that's about all the time we have. One of the things I did want to mention actually is I do get asked quite often, why is it, people will come in and say, Dave, why is it that I hear all the time about the S&P 500, the Dow Jones Industrial, and the NASDAQ? So they'll say the Dow went up 100 points, the S&P 500 went up 50 points, and the NASDAQ went up 30 points. What does that even mean? And it's a more complicated discussion for another day. Investopedia has a nice article on it, but just know that the reason we report on the Dow moving up and down and the S&P moving up and down is because historically those indexes, and all they are is just indexes of different stocks, but those indexes are fairly reflective and fairly accurate of what's going on in the stock market overall. So let's say you and I have a 401k and we're diversified and we've got lots of different stocks in our account. If we see the news one day and it says the Dow was down 100 points, which is about 0.5%, about 0.75% down, then it's pretty likely that if we were to check our 401k that night that we'd be down. No matter what we're holding, if it's a diversified portfolio, it's going to be down about 0.75%. So it's just a way for us to quickly gauge whether or not our accounts and whether or not the stock market as a whole is moving up or down. And those are indexes that have been used for a very long time. And sometimes they're not perfectly accurate. Like the Dow only has 30 stocks in it, so sometimes there's one stock that really drives the Dow up or down, and it's not reflective of the whole market. But historically, the S&P, the NASDAQ, and the Dow have been fairly accurate in helping us understand which direction the market's moving. So that's why you always hear them in the news. That's why you see them, whenever you look up a financial site, they always show you what the Dow did that day, and it's because those will give you an indication of how the market's moving. Okay. Any questions about that? We're gonna stop on the content on that note, and give you some information about your other material for this week. Okay, so as far as the discussion board is concerned, pretty straightforward. The discussion board asks you to consider the idea of why it might make sense for management to understand investing principles. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about investing. We haven't really talked about a lot of principles of investing. That might be something you might want to look up a few articles on and get an idea of what it really means to do principled investing and what kinds of principles are associated with successful investing. And then compare that to management. Most of us are familiar with managers and management, okay, in some way. And say to yourself, okay, what of those principles of investing would be helpful for a manager or for me as a manager or owner of a company to understand, okay? And just try to find some different things that are consistent across both of those. So somebody who is a successful investor, what about that would make them a successful manager as well, potentially, okay? Well, just an example. Successful investors are usually patient, okay, with their goals, and their goals are usually long-term. And even when the market goes against them, like it has this last week and a half, the market's been very poor, they're not going to be reactive to that. They're going to stay the course and be consistent and be patient toward their goal. And I could say that a successful manager, when they have a good vision, you know, and they've got their team on track for that goal, and then some kind of challenge comes up, okay, and really sets them back, instead of scrapping the goal, instead of reacting and becoming, you know, crazed and mean and firing people and being ruthless about their job and having the ego power trip thing that sometimes managers do, instead of doing that, they just stay consistent, they stay patient, they stay the course, and they lift us, you know, as far as keeping us in the game, you know, and on track for our goal. That would be a successful management type, right? At least in my mind. So that's one example of, you know, successful investing principle of consistency and patience crossing over to, you know, what we could do as a manager. All right. So that's the discussion board. Just be careful that you read the readings and try to integrate readings into what you're discussing as well, like we mentioned, so that I can see that effort and see that you've looked at the required readings. Then, as far as the assignment this week, the assignment's a little different. There's some required readings, and then it tells you to write at least 750 words, okay, which we've already talked about is about 3 pages of writing, okay, and it asks you to basically address a case study. And the case study is just a person's situation. They've got some things that they could do. So basically, they're going to have $25,000 of student loan debt when they're done with school, but right now they have $10,000 sitting that they could invest. And right now, they're not paying payments on their student loans, right, because they're still in school. And so the question is, would you have that individual invest, and how, if they're going to invest, would you have them do it, or would you have them just pay that $10,000 towards their debt? And everyone's going to have a different opinion on that, so don't worry, there's not a right or wrong answer. Just give your opinion, and then substantiate your opinion with information, right? Why do you think the way you do? What about your personality makes it so that you think that what you said is the right thing for this person to do as well? And try to read through all the details and really create a scenario and then create backup material. You're going to need to do some research and bring in some material in order to make 3 pages out of this case study, right? Because the case study just says which one of the options should they do and why. You know, most of us could answer that in a short answer question, but you've got to get to 3 pages. That's going to be a challenge, so we need to do some research so that we can get some more content. Okay? That's this week's assignment. You'll all do great on that. My one request, though, on formatting, we talked about how I'm not really, you know, I'm not going to be really specific about APA, but I do like everybody to use Word, to do 12-point font, and to have double spacing. It just makes it easier for me to grade, so that I understand how much content there is. Don't change the margins. Don't change the indentations. Just 12-point font, double spacing, you know, and give me at least 3 pages of content. Okay? All right. Any questions on the assignment or the discussion board for this week? Okay. Here are the questions that you'll need to know, the topics that you'll need to know for the test. As I mentioned, there's only 10 questions. I've already mentioned at least once in this session that there, a slide that, that material, it's the net demanders versus net suppliers of capital. That will be on the test. You'll just need to understand who is net suppliers and who is net demanders. You don't need to really feel like you have a great understanding. You're not going to have to write an essay question about it, but you do need to understand who typically is a net supplier and who typically is a net demander from that slide. Number 1 on the test, you'll need to know about capital markets, okay? Capital markets and money markets. So there was the slide where it talked about money markets being short-term, capital markets being long-term, and then it kind of gave you some examples of the different investment types in those different categories. So just be careful that you understand that and read the whole question, because people on number 1 on the test, sometimes there's 2 parts to the question. They look at it, they hurry and answer one way because of the first part, and as you know, that can trick you. So just make sure you read both parts of the question for number 1 on the test, and be careful that you're answering the whole question, not just part of it. Okay? That's consistent with all instructions and all test questions, but that particular question stumps a few people because they go too fast, I think. Number 2 on the test, this one just asks you to understand what's sold in capital markets again. So numbers 1 and 2, if you understand what sells in capital markets and what's in money markets, the differences there and some examples, you'll be in great shape. Number 3, this is from chapter 2, and we didn't cover it, but there's a quiet period when a company is going to file an IPO, an initial public offering in the primary market. You'll need to know what that quiet period is and why there is a quiet period. Okay, what's referred to as a quiet period. So look it up, just take a quick note, make sure you understand what the quiet period is and why there is a quiet period. Number 4, on the test talks about pricing. You'll want to understand what the slides and what literature out there has to say about pricing of IPOs on the first day. Okay, so what kind of pricing do initial public offerings have on the first day of trading? And if you just understand if it's high, if it's low, you'll be in great shape for number 4, excuse me. Number 1 and 2, Annette, were about capital markets and what trades in capital markets. Remember, number 1 was the money market example versus the capital markets. Number 2 was capital markets again. What trades in capital markets? If you understand what does, you'll get that one right. Number 5 on the test is you want to understand requirements of exchanges. So these different exchanges like the New York Stock Exchange, the American Stock Exchange that we've got on this slide that we're looking at now, they all have requirements for companies to be listed on their exchange. And if those companies don't meet those requirements or fall out of compliance, they can be what's referred to as delisted, which means they basically get kicked out of the exchange. Okay, so just understand the listing, delisting for these different exchanges, why companies get listed or delisted on those exchanges. Make sure you understand what debt is according to the slide that we looked at. Remember how we talked about how bonds, debt, fixed income, they're all interchangeable? If you understand what a bond is something that you get paid interest on over time, and then you get paid back the principal at the end, just like a loan, right? Then you'll get this one right, because it's just asking what debt represents, and basically the definition of a bond. Number 7 on the test is the question about net demander versus net supplier of funds. We talked about that before. That will be on the test, just recognizing the difference of those. Number 8 on the test is the same concept, just a different question about that. So if you understand net demanders versus net suppliers and who they are among those 3, individuals, companies, and government, then you'll get 7 and 8 right on the test. Number 9 on the test is what is traded in the securities market. That's the question, so just make sure you understand. We talked about how, any kind of investment can be referred to as a security, right? So just keep that in mind for that answer. And number 10 on the test asks among the different options that they give you, okay, among the different examples of investments that they give you, which one would be the most liquid? And what does liquid mean? It just means which one is the most short-term investment as far as available to get your money out, okay? So we talked about capital markets, money markets. Remember how we talked about how money markets are a much more short-term and liquid option than capital markets. And you'll want to see what, when we refer to short-term investments, what some of those examples are for number 10 on the test, and you'll get that one right. Okay? All right. Any of those questions? I know, there's some more, research that you need to do. I didn't give you the answer on all those. Some of it we didn't cover very well tonight because we didn't have enough time to cover everything as far as the content. You will have the slides. Those will help. But those topic areas that I've given you will just give you just enough to go do a little bit of research before you get to the test, and you'll be in great shape. Okay? But any other concerns or questions before we wrap up tonight? Okay. Have a great evening. Thanks, Annette. Thanks, Marianne, for joining. Excited to start a new mod, and make sure and let me know if you have any questions or concerns. It's going to be a great mod. All of you will get A's if you put in the effort, and we'll get you there. We'll post the slides on the announcement board, so you'll see those to the announcement board. Okay? All right. Have a great evening.